Oh, hey, Dratnos. Are you ready to go Night Fae on all of your characters for the new critter customization coming in 9.1.5?
I already have gone Night Fae on all my characters, so I can DPS on them. Are you ready for your new travel form customizations?
Of course, I'm really looking forward to and hoping that they'll please consider adding a race car travel form option. That way, I can vroom around Korthia at maximum speed.
I actually, I actually think that would be really cool.
That would be ridiculous.
Could you imagine if they added like goblin druids and gave them that as their default travel form? Just like a goblin
a
go
motor
kart.
a motorcycle or something.
Yeah.
That would
Oh
be
no.
that'd be absurd.
Okay,
Um,
so yeah, for those who don't know, they've recently announced that in 9.1.5, which also I guess has been recently announced as a result of this, there are going to be a bunch of new customization options, which is something that players have been asking for quite a while, right? New travel form options, new soul shapes and critter shapes
mhm.
for Night Fae players, but the critter shapes only work in rested areas because they make you too small. Otherwise, that would be too strong in like PvP and stuff. So um, don't worry, the balance is going to be fine there. But the thing is that Blizzard had announced that there weren't going to be new customization options mostly during Shadowlands. So this, change on that, right, gives players that most dangerous feeling, right? Hope that they are thinking of of more ways
Oh,
that they might change the game further in 9.1.5.
yes, and something interesting too that they also have talked about and added. So we know that on last week's show we were talking about how they were changing conduits to be spec specific. That's an absolutely phenomenal change. They also have another smaller quality of life change that's coming through, where it's like legendary research alt on the vendors. We were kind of joking last time about having to go back to Stone Legion generals to get your legendary recipe. So this is another good thing where they, oh gosh, how much does it cost to buy the legendary
It's
research?
2,000 for a random memory, which means if you're on a character that has like 8 unresearched memories and you want one of them, it's still going to cost you on average like 10,000 research to actually land that one.
Hmm.
But it's still a nice change. It does kind of bring in a little bit of a problem where it kind of reminds me of some of the problem we had with Echoes of Nyalotha, where they were like good, but they kept being used as the same solution for all things we might have wanted. And that it kind of actually compounded the grind in a way because everything was the same currency, and so it didn't actually shorten the grind because you had to use the same thing for everything. But in general, yeah, I think this is definitely a welcome change. It's not something I would actually consider using on any of my alts though, because again, I already need 100,000 catalog research for all my sockets and stuff, conduits.
Yeah, and I think if you're a player that's playing a character to that level, anyways,
Yeah, it's nice if you're somebody who doesn't intend to buy conduits with research, right? If in that case, you might already have more research than you need. Although most people I know that are in that situation aren't farming any research, right? The reason they're doing that is because they do not want to go and farm catalog research because it's Korthia.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not the most enjoyable experience. It's not the worst thing ever. Sometimes,
So with all this in mind, we thought it would be a good idea to do a list of the top 5 things we wanted to see in patch 9.1.5 on that kind of quality of life. Things that they maybe haven't done in the past, but looks like there's maybe a renewed willingness to do these sorts of changes. We wanted to start off. Well, we had some honorable mentions there, um,
the honorable
which
mentions were what we moved to number five, and
right.
number five is the things that we've always wished for across the whole entire expansion, whether that be infinite covenant swaps, conduit energy removal, and removal of the AoE cap for a lot of specs. These are things that we think probably won't change, but if they were to rethink them, we would be very grateful.
Yeah, of them, I think the conduit energy is the one they're most able to give ground on a short notice.
Sure.
I think there, even if they need to keep conduit energy for whatever convoluted reason they've invented for that system to exist, a spec specific conduit would go a long way towards fixing the main problem. Which the main problem that people have with conduit energy is when they want to play like both frost and fire on Naya, right? And it's just like, okay, well, each time I would like to do that, it's going to cost me 3 conduit energy, which means I can only do it twice per week, right? I can be fire and frost each week, but I can't be fire, frost, and fire each
Yeah.
week.
And the reason that obviously the Infinite Covenant swaps highly wished for. I mean, not only does it lock you from playing it blocks you from playing specialization sometimes. On top of that, it may block you from getting invited to a key group that you otherwise would get invited to in LFG. You may have made an incorrect choice, which I think is less the case now on this patch. But at the same time, I think the biggest issue is that it blocks you from being able to play multiple specializations at a level that you would prefer to.
Yeah, I think that's again, like if there were spec specific covenants, that would also go a long way towards fixing a lot of the issue with that as well. Because the big problem again is it's like, oh, I wish I was Venthyr for Frost and Nightfade for Fire, right?
And then the AoE cap, it's not because AoE cap specs just innately do worse damage. There are things like Windwalker Monk that even though they're capped on their AoE damage, they do stupid amounts of AoE. It's just like fundamental design decision discrepancies between how I personally feel and probably how Dratnos feels about how these specs should do DPS to AoE trash packs, at least in dungeons specifically. For raid, very irrelevant.
Yeah, this is something where it's like this is the least changeable mid expansion of anything, right? Because it does require a rebalance of everything, right? Like you'd have to actually look at all the numbers for, okay, well if this hits at any number of targets, what are we going to have to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
But I do wish that we returned to a world where a sixth monster being pulled into a pack no longer, or once again, increased our damage instead of keeping it the same. Because I think that there should be a risk reward for pulling extra mobs, and right now it's only a risk for a lot of specs. Or you bring the specs that it's a reward for, and that I think has very chilling metagame ramifications.
Yeah, it's also kind of strange how just like half of most of the DPS's kits will be just like target capped, and then the other half aren't, and it's just like
I actually think that's fine. I think that when like as long as you got some stuff that's good damage that's not capped, I think it's fine to add some identity to like which of your cleave spells and which aren't. For me, the problem is like the entire specs that are that are fully capped, and also just like it just feels like you're weak when you're spinning around and doing a whirlwind or doing a blade dance, right? And it just looks like you should be hitting everything and you aren't. I don't know that. Those abilities in particular to me, like those look like you're hitting everything. You should hit everything.
You should hit everything, yeah. All right, so what was number 4 for us?
So this is a Great Vault quality of life, which is something that I think has gotten markedly worse this patch as a result of the domination shard system, which actually has kind of reserved 6 slots on a lot of players' gear because it reserves the 5 slots that those domination sockets go on, plus the 1 slot that your legendary is forced onto because it's the only spot you can craft it because the other spot is also one of your domination spots.
Yeah.
Which means that when you're opening a Mythic Plus Great Vault, you're now 50-50 shot of even getting an item that is interesting to look at all versus that feeling of like, oh, you got shoulders. Like, yeah, even though it's an item level upgrade, you're never going to pick that because you have a domination 226 or 233 already in that slot.
I think that the Great Vault coming into this expansion was one of the best decisions that they made for gearing options. It unified PvP, Mythic Plus, and Raid all together under this like one chest, right? That you get to pick loot from based on the difficulty of the content that you're doing. And I do really think that the Great Vault was an excellent addition coming into this patch. But I would have to agree that there being so many limited slots based on a system that isn't ideal is what the problem ultimately comes down to. It's not that the Great Vault being limited by slots is like really that bad. Can you imagine if it was tier sets or something like that? It would make a lot more sense if the Great Vault was like limited by tier sets or something of that matter. But it being limited by domination sockets, where the first couple of weeks you are almost mandatorily required to pick the domination socket pieces, and if you get those slots from Mythic Plus or PvP, they're basically just unpickable. That feels kind of weird to me.
Yeah, so I think the one way they could look at this is like look at changing the chances of getting those slots from the Great Vault in a sort of similar way to at the start of patch 8.3 when there was the legendary cloak everybody had. Yeah. And you could get a Mythic Plus cloak out of your Great Vault. They changed, or out of your weekly box. They changed that fairly quickly. And I think this is something worth looking into as well, which is maybe if you have raid slots in your Great Vault, then you can't get the domination slots out of your M plus and PvP rows or something. I don't know.
If there was slot BLP, that would actually be kind of cool.
I think another thing to think about here, which kind of ties into our number 3, is domination shard changes. I think it would be cool if they went deeper on the domination shard system to expand it to PvP and M plus, which would remove a lot of this pain point, right? Like if just M plus and PvP shoulders had domination sockets, that problem also is solved that way, right?
Yes, that problem definitely fixes itself if that does happen. We'll just pivot straight into number 3, which is the domination. I think that was a good pivot. If they also made the set bonuses work in Mythic Plus too, that would make a lot more sense. I think the weird thing to think about with that though is that it looks like domination shards are probably only going to be like a one patch thing. They seem thematically like they're tied very heavily to the Sanctum of Domination patch 9.1 kind of thing, and I don't expect them to like stay into 9.2. So then that calls into question, oh, should there really be that many QOL changes put into Shards of Domination in 9.1.5, even though this is just like a one patch wonder kind of thing?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but it seems like it's already going to be weird when we lose them next patch, right? May as well go more into having them be good while they're here rather than just having them be bad while they're here and then bad that they go away.
Are they just going to be? I bet they're just going to be completely disabled in 9.2.
Maybe it kind of seems like the set bonuses are going to be turned off, but the effects won't. But I'm not sure.
Well, that's
the
issue.
Case, then we're going to keep wearing our 259 domination socket pieces for ages. So yeah, I have no idea what they're going to do with them.
Yeah, I mean, imagine trying to unequip a 259 core shard or something. You're just like, oh, I guess I'm going to wear this for all of eternity. Thanks.
Right. It would be like Benthic gear again, where it's like 30 item levels lower and it's a 2% DPS upgrade.
Yeah. Okay, so that should definitely be remedied going into 9.2 if this is a one spec wonder. But anyways, as for the 9.1.5 thing, I think that it would be a lot more interesting, like you said, if the set bonuses worked in Mythic Plus.
But that is conditional on being able to acquire and upgrade the shards from Mythic Plus as well.
Yes.
That's the thing. Like, I think that it is right now they've got it in a spot where they're like, they kind of are hedging their bets, right? By having it so the set bonuses don't work at M plus, but it's still like a 10% DPS upgrade and a Pride as shield you're giving up on if you aren't getting your shards, right? Which is like, all right, it still feels bad to pass up on that, even if you can do the keys. Like you're not happy about not having the domination shards. So may as well just add them to the tormented season all around. I think
they would have to rebalance the they would have to rebalance the timers on a lot of the dungeons pretty heavily, because right now the timers for a lot of the keys, because of tormented, is fairly lenient. And if they added something that would give you 10% damage in Mythic Plus, that would kind of throw literally every timer out of whack.
Right. And I would. So this segues us into number 2, which is I would like them to do another thing that would completely throw a wrench into the timers of M plus. Which in practice, if they just implemented these changes at the same time, they could just make a new, like Raider.io could make a new season, and we could start tracking our new season scores after these changes instead, and the keys would be higher and stuff. Which I'd like to see a revitalization of the tormented affix, because it's good affix. But I think it's an affix that is easy to improve as well if you're willing to kind of go in and do some surgery on it.
So the pros of the tormented affix are it's not that hard to play. And it doesn't lock down your route. And then on top of that, you can play the debuffs with the last boss of a dungeon. And I think that that's also just like a really cool thing, because the downsides of Prideful, I would say initially was just a cooler affix, but the longer the season went on, the more restrictive your routes were. You were playing Prideful instead of playing the dungeon. And I think that Tormented addresses all of these things. And while it is a little bit more in the lame department, it does fix the ultimate problems that Prideful did have by addressing those things, such as not impacting your route. You're able to pull those mobs whenever you want. You're also, on top of this, able to play the debuffs with the last boss. But at the same time, the anima powers, which were what you were talking about, are things that we were looking for, are on a little bit unfun spectrum.
Yeah, so that is point. Like when we talk about revitalization of Tormented, I think the first thing to do is look at some of those anima powers, and be like, okay, maybe we should make something more interesting here.
It's Execution of Varuth, at least for DPS specifically, probably also for tank, because I played a little bit of tank and I thought that Varuth's powers were kind of cool. But for DPS specifically, Executioner of Ruth has the most interesting powers. He has Champion's Brand, which is, for most cases, the best damage option on that row. Then he has Necrotic Wound, Dagger, which, if you were fighting a boss-heavy or low mob density dungeon, or you were a spec that does a lot of individual hits,
Yeah, high haste spec.
yeah, Necrotic Wound Dagger, very, very strong, and it does something upwards of 5% of your overall in a key. And the last one is Volcanic Plume, which is a utility choice. And I will admit, if you have two people playing Volcanic Plume in a dungeon, you have entered the mobs into a bounce house, and you just lob them into the air over and over again. And those choices are really interesting for like which one you're supposed to make win. The rest of the powers are just very unfortunate and there aren't a lot of options.
Right, like you deal 10% increased damage to targets you've interrupted for 8 seconds.
That's to one target, by the way.
Yeah, unless you find a way to interrupt 2 targets in the same 8-second window.
10% damage to the target you're interrupted. And then you have like the choice between 50% DR for 4 seconds after losing 50% of your health, or the Stone Ward Shield, which, okay, the Pride Ash Shield is cool, but it's like, those powers, I would say, are the least egregious, but at the same time, I think that they shouldn't have focused on utility powers, and I think that they should have just made, like, focused on utility powers in that way, and I think that they should have made them very similar to Volcanic Plume, and how
I think they could look at some of the Terror Grew powers and consider adding those. Like, I think stuff like the you steal and rage and magic effects from targets you're hitting, sometimes that could be an interesting one for like raging weeks, and for certain dungeons, if you don't have a soothe, you don't have a purge, right? You get a couple people to pick something like that. And then again, you get more of these rows like the DPS Executioner of Ruth rows, where it's like there are situations where you'd pick all 3 of these, and they're actually interesting differences, right? It's not just like this spec always picks this. It's like, oh, this week I'd like to try out this one. This dungeon I'd like to try out this one.
Funnily enough, there actually is that kind of decision for the bolstering power on
Explosive week.
It's really, really good on Explosive week.
Yeah, because explosives bolster you.
Exactly, which I don't hate it.
I think that one's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think that just a general revitalization of powers would be interesting. One of the healer powers doesn't even let you select it for a healer.
It doesn't function. If you click it, you just get the placeholder. This is not for your spec thing.
Yeah, the tiny dancing shoes. I think it's the 50% dodge one. Yeah, no, that's not okay.
Which brings us all the way to number 1 on our wish list: the consolidation of the grind for alts. And we talked about this in previous videos like this and in all other sorts of previous content we've made. But right now, the state of the game when you are booting up a fresh alt, you level up to 60, you're having fun, you've got a nice, easy path in front of you. It's clear what your next thing to do is. All those things are kind of standard fun, wow, leveling, Then you hit 60 and just, you have a campaign to do. You have another campaign to do after that.
Yep.
You have a bunch of renown you need to grind. You need to go acquire your legendary powers. You need to go collect a bunch of soul cinders to make your legendary. You need to go and do Korthia every day to upgrade your sockets, to upgrade your conduits. You need to make sure you're clearing the raid for your domination sockets, for your domination shards. You need to get your Mythic Plus score up to 2,000 so you can use Valor to upgrade your stuff. You need to get the items you need from Valor as well. You just have like 40 different grinds unraveling in front of you. And the thing is, on most people have 1 or 2 of those that like they would like to do, right?
Yes.
It's different answers for different people of which of those are the reason they made the alt, like what they want to do on the alt. But basically nobody wants to do all of those on their alt.
And there was something that you mentioned about the raid for domination shards. It's not like you have to go and kill like 1 or 2 bosses a week for chances at the pieces that you have to get. You want to full clear the raid for chances at the shards themselves, and then make sure that those individual boss kills, there are people that will trade the domination socketed pieces to you.
I think almost nobody's in a position where they can get people to come help trade them domination
unless
pieces,
they're in a mythic raiding guild, of course.
Right. That's the thing, is if there are some people who are going to have an easier time with that than others, but realistically everybody's gated by that same thing, which is like 400 Stygia numbers to upgrade your stuff to rank 5.
Yeah, like you said, the fact that there was such an extensive list of things that you listed off, and I'm probably sure that there was something that was missed. That's the bad part. That there shouldn't be There are 6 things listed on our show notes. There shouldn't be 6 things in 100% things that you have to catch up on. And it's like we mentioned last week in our show. I think that there's a certain level where your alt should have to do these things to be able to catch up. Maybe at 50% speed, not 100%. Like it's always going to match your main's progression level. You shouldn't be able to just fork over everything that your main has ever owned to your alt and just like play it 1-to-1. But at the same time, it shouldn't be just this extensive, I have to do everything my main is doing to be able to play my alt kind of level.
So yeah, what I'd like to see here is not all of these grinds being purchasable for cataloged research as well, which is so, like you could imagine them adding like a renown for 2000 cataloged research and like all these things for cataloged research. And I think that instead what they should do is spread out these different things, and so add more ways of doing one grind with another in such a way that it kind of makes a mesh, right? Where it's like, oh, there's 3 different answers for how I can get my soul cinders, right? Oh, there's 3 different answers for how I can get my conduits. And I think that even one of the answers also could be BOA from your mains. Like you have BOA Soul Ash effectively, although it turns out that's actually not one of the grinds that you'll run into problems with right now. But that I think is a good way to do that. And I think adding more BOA ways to do these grinds. For instance, BOA Soul or Stygian Embers on your main. Once you have like 5 rank 5 domination shards, maybe let us send some Stygian Embers from our mains to our alts, and that would mean, hey, if we're raiding every week and we're doing it on our main, like why not let us use that to power up our alts as well?
Or honestly, they can increase the Valor cap and then have like purchasable domination shards or domination socketed pieces with Valor.
Well, yeah, and that kind of ties back into like adding all that stuff to M plus as well, but that would go a long way towards reducing the grind also. Is just if M plus and PvP were valid ways of obtaining the system of the patch, right? The domination shards.
Yeah. But ultimately, that is our top 5. What is your top 5 wish list of things that you're looking for in 9.1.5? Let us know down in the comments and down in the description. Not description, but let us know down in the comments. Beyond that, anything else you have to say?
Yeah, I'm hoping that they add squirrel critter shapes. That's the one I'll be. I'll be a little squirrel hopping around the heart of the forest.
Okay, you're so cooked. You can check out these articles that we looked at today down in the description, and we hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.